All right, I'm Jaymie Friesen. My brother and I landed on this 160-acre lot about 3 years ago. We started with absolutely nothing. We were 40K in debt. My previous business went bankrupt during COVID, and now we built all this somehow, some way, and now we help educate everybody else how to do the same. So this was one of the first spots that we ever started with. So we kind of abide by permaculture principles using zones. So this would be our zone 0. This is kind of the main hub. So we have lounge, gym, dining, commercial kitchen in the can on the right, and then storage in the can on the left. And then this, we made some design mistakes originally with this. This is a full hydrotherapy spa setup. This used to be probably 300-400 feet that way. Because we wanted it to be closer to our guests. So something that we learned was to prioritize efficiency over guest experience, because they ultimately don't really care that much anyway, as long as they still get to use it. So for example, we would be walking, 400 feet over there just to light the fire and then go back and stoke it every 30 minutes. And it was really inefficient for bringing water there and everything else. So we decided to kind of bring this area all together this year. So this is a kind of a new project that we're just starting to, we're just finishing. Obviously we haven't sided that, but yeah. And then throughout our journey, our goal here is to really build a group of companies that essentially helps people do this, from getting the land to actually building the structures on the land. And as a part of that, about 3 months ago, we acquired Elk Ridge Cabin Co. So it's a cabin, tiny home, and sauna manufacturing business to be able to outfit the properties. So that sauna was the first thing we got from that business a few months ago, which was nice. And then yeah, outdoor shower, cold plunge tubs, and then we're gonna do some wow factors off the side here. It's gonna be a little bridge out into the trees with some hanging nets for people to kind of lounge in and read some books and things like that. And then we'll do a fire pit down below on the second terrace. And yeah, that's kind of, we use this as a big attraction to get people involved with the project. It's a nicety for everybody. We call it a wow factor because it's something that attracts anybody, from an investor for the money to help you do it in the first place, to, live work exchange, to staff, to guests to come and pay and be a part of it, even to host workshops to educate people. It's a huge thing to be able to also offer them some luxuries and be able to have fun and stuff like that. So yeah, this is, and also like, we just love it and we just want a sauna for ourselves anyway. So yeah. Yeah, we'll kind of cover that zone after if we want. So that's kind of basically the easiest place for us to put all of the residence sites. So we'll go check out my tiny home and Shelby's, and this driveway basically runs all the way down, so we can just expand this endlessly for however many residents we'd ever want. But first, we'll kind of go this way and go walk through those zones, those permaculture zones. So coming into zone 1 is where we would like to have more of our intensively managed stuff, which would be the garden. As you can see, we're kind of late on planting that this year, but every other year we've been pretty on top of it. This year we want to focus more on planting perennials and things that, a little bit less maintenance. And then also where we have a nursery greenhouse set up, and then we have some chickens and whatnot cruising around. But ultimately, this is our well house. So we have a drilled well here. It's 360 feet deep. We only get about 8 gallons a minute, which is not enough to support cattle, for example. So for us, we'll go and we'll check some of these out, but we're starting to build a pond network of 35 plus ponds around the property that will hold over 200 million gallons of water. And that will gravity feed orchard, pasture land, feed cows, all that kind of stuff, because right now we simply just don't have enough water out of our wells. And I'll talk more about how that will be a huge part of obviously regenerating the soil and replenishing our aquifer to the point that we hope, 5-10 years from now, maybe longer, we'll actually have springs once again running on the property, because we have seasonal springs now that used to run year round, and we think that we can kind of repower those with that method. So yeah.
Was this top pond there already?
This is the only pond that was here. Yeah, we can walk by in a minute. But we'll go and I'll show you some other ones that are pretty exciting. We have one up top that's pretty much, we call it the lake. Technically, I don't think it's a lake, but it's a very large pond that we'll be swimming in, and we're doing a floating sauna up there, and where the dock's coming in a few weeks. We got the floaties coming to build that. Yeah. So yeah, we definitely learned some things on the, we got our garlic coming up right now, which is awesome. Definitely learned some things with the animal side of things. We ended up with doing a chicken tractor, which honestly in hindsight makes no sense for what we're doing, just because it's so sloped and everything. And also I think the size of it is kind of utterly stupid. I think like it only holds like 7 hens, for example. And I think and as you can tell, we didn't get a chicken sexer in to tell us the gender, so we ended up with, I think, 6 roosters and 1 hen. So kind of not the best. So what we're doing with this, this will just probably leave for demonstration, just to show people what a chicken tractor is. But we removed this tent that used to be a rental, and right here we're going to put a large chicken coop that's just permanent. And the reason we're putting it here is because they scratch downhill. So as we throw food scraps and stuff in, they'll be able to scratch downhill, and then we can move it right over into the composting system right there, which then moves right over into the garden. So trying to stack functions and keep everything efficient. And right beside it, these are temporary dog kennels. We'll actually put them right beside the chicken coop, because that's why they're here, to protect them. And then this will be a nursery greenhouse that'll pretty much come out here. Like we have for 2 reasons. One, just for like production trees, like we want to be able to do you know, apples. We can do hardy kiwis. Normally up here, that's probably the gist of what you could do, like Hascap berries kind of deal. We're in like an alpine desert climate, so it's like 51 degrees Celsius in the summers, and we hit negative 50 degrees with wind chill this winter. Negative 35 or negative 38 without wind chill. So with that, there's not a whole, it's kind of a weird growing environment. So we're using ponds to actually try to create microclimates. Because the reflection of the sun increases sunlight onto the leaves of your nearby trees by about 60%, as well as the evaporative effect creates a more humid climate for them. So we think that we might be able to get away with, you know, certain types of cherries and potentially blueberries, pears, even things of that sort. So we can expand what we can grow using the network of ponds that we're building.
And what do you have flagged?
Yeah, we can walk down here. So we've started terracing this. It's hard to tell because everything's overgrown. So that's a hugelkultur mound. On this side, we planted 100 strawberry plants last year. So we're just kind of letting them do their thing and come back. But these flags here are actually for, I forget what they're called. Chinampas is what they're called. And essentially it's like a finger that extends into the water. And we'll actually walk this way, and I'll walk onto one as an example. So the pond's super high right now, so they're looking kind of wet, but you can see these extend, this one extending right here. Well, when the pond's normal height, it actually extends probably 3-4 feet farther. But essentially, you would do a bunch of these all the way down, and you would plant on them because it's the perfect thing from the microclimate effect I mentioned earlier of being close to the water as well as never needing to water them. And then this was like an ancient Aztec thing where they would come in on canoes and actually harvest from below. So it's just a kind of a unique demonstration opportunity. So that's what that's for. And then this terrace would be all Hascat berries, blueberries, things of that sort. And then moving up, we would start to do larger trees, and then hopefully kind of stagger, do a like a, I forget what it's called. It's like the pan method where you kind of dig like up on this hillside. You can see where these flags are. So you dig this out. You can also see there's wild strawberries everywhere here. They just haven't come in yet. But you do like a pan method where you dig this out into a big circular flat pan. You'd plant a tree here, and then you would run a little baby ditch, like a swale, up to the next one. So it would go like that, and then 2 more trees, and then again, each one would branch out. And that way when water comes, and when it rains and water comes down the hill, it'll catch in those swales and direct it to the pans for the future orchard here. Yeah, so that would be zone 0 near the main, and then zone 1 where, you know, garden and chickens, and then we would be in zone 2 right now, a little bit less managed. And then moving into zone 3, which would be just, I don't know, in between here and around those wall tents and stuff. We wanted to do some cultural plants that we could just let grow on their own. So things like sweetgrass, lavender, sage, things of that, and just leave it kind of open for harvest from local elders and things of that sort. So this is, Jason's living here right now. He is our live-work exchange for the season. I don't know if he'll want to stay in there through winter, but we have before. So yeah, these were some of the first units that we built. This is all milled out of our own timber. So that's all milled either with a bandsaw mill or by hand with a chainsaw mill. And stained and whatnot. So these are 16 by 32 feet in total, including the covered patio, so they're quite large. We've used them for all sorts of workshops and retreats, and that was our main source of income when we first started this. We had super limited budget, so we came in and we got an investor and we kept buyback rights so that we could buy them out at any point in time in the future using the money that the property generates. So we took about 350,000 roughly, and with that we drilled a well. We spent way too much money on mistakes. We probably wasted 150K on the wrong machinery. You know, we tried to come up here in the snow. We spent 100 grand before we even got up our own driveway, just on just outfitting tooling and equipment and everything else to be able to make any of it happen. And we overbuilt a lot of things and just, you know, generally made a lot of mistakes. For example, you look at these T-brackets down here, each one of those lugs is like, I don't know, $20. And so it's just like, it adds up so much, you know, like for example, this tent probably cost $3,000 just for the canvas, but then the pressure treated wood and decking and everything else, that all costs probably 15 grand. So it just adds up and people don't think about those costs. So that's a lot of the thing what we help people do is basically don't make the mistakes that we made. And you know, you can see that we've had some of them where we've taken them down and things like that. Whereas a great alternative would be, instead of this, which rents out for $200, $250 a night, mainly because we have nice amenities like the saunas and things like that. I would just do a bell tent. A bell tent's going to cost you 3 grand. You can put it on the ground and you can set it up super fast, and then use that money to then reinvest and then invest in a nicer platform and things like that. So we went really overkill. Originally, we actually wanted to do individual saunas and hot tubs, wood fire hot tubs at every single tent, so they were all private. and that is like something that I would never do again. One of our biggest pieces of learning was to consolidate everything as much as possible, especially when you're out here off grid, because everything for your heat, your water, your power, all those systems, the more you spread them out, it's just incredibly inefficient, not just for the actual fuel sources and things like that. Like for example, if you have multiple solar setups and you have to buy wire that's gonna, you know, run 100 feet or something, you're looking at $4,000 for a piece of wire. And if you have to do that 5 times, it's like kind of really poor use of funds. But also because of our winters and everything, and also man hours, people don't really consider the man hours. So it comes from the permaculture design acronym, which is water access structures. So for example, if you were to come in and build your house first, and then you drill a well and you realize that there's only water 1,000 feet away from your well, well, now you just cost yourself an extra $20,000 in having to run water lines back to your structure, when you should have done water first, and then you would know where to put the roads, and then you would know where to put the structures. So you can see that around all of our ponds, as we kind of go on the tour, that we have access roads. We always build access roads around every waterway. And like waterways, not waterways, but roadways, trail systems, that type of thing is one of the biggest factors in droughting your property that people never consider. They just go out and they just build roads wherever they want. And then they're sucking water from one area of a property and putting it somewhere where it shouldn't be or where it might not be used best. So we're very diligent in trying to design first and make sure that we're not making those mistakes, because we have, and they're very costly. Another good example is, you know, if your water is 1,000 feet away and you plant your garden there because your water's there, but then your house is way over there, and you walk to your garden, you forget a rake, and then you have to walk all the way back, or you have to drive there and back, and then you extrapolate that out over 10-20 years, you're wasting tens of thousands of man hours, you're wasting fuel costs, you're wasting the cost of actually paying people to do that, you're also wasting the maintenance on machinery. So it becomes a big deal when you're out here. So we really try and focus on helping people strategize on what do you build, and what do you build first, and where do you build it. And a big motto of ours has always been that you can do anything you want, but what you do first matters. Because, for example, if you go, we actually did this as a test, so we have a real life example to share with people. So we had folks as a part of our community living here. This was a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, and they really were scared. They were coming from a fear mindset. They were really wanting food security, and they were scared that they were going to run out of food. And what I think a really great opportunity for that, if you want to feel safe, go buy some seeds and put them in cold storage and you're good. But they wanted the garden, and they wanted it now, and they wanted it growing immediately. So we invested $30,000 worth of man hours, worth of, you know, bringing in seeds and soil and everything else to build a nice big garden. And we got it going. And they're like, yeah, you know, we're gonna take it to market, anything we don't eat, blah, blah. You know, they take it to market. It was a ton of work. They take it to market. They made $87 off of that garden. So if you take that 30 grand and you build something like this, which makes about $40,000 to $50,000 a year in rental income, you could build 1.7 sizes of that garden every year for the next 10 years. So 10 years down the road, you have something that's 20 times the size of the garden, and you have income. So it's pretty wild, and from choosing the wrong thing is what makes these projects fail, and they end up going bankrupt or going insane because they're too focused on community when they should be focused on infrastructure. They come onto a piece of land and they think that, yeah, you know, we're gonna get our band of buddies and we're gonna do all this, but there's nothing here yet, and it's really hard and frustrating, and nobody knows what to do, and then it's just everybody just starts quarreling with each other. And it's I find a lot of people are trying to put square pegs into round holes because they're trying to like do it with a bunch of people who are like-minded, but they don't have the skill set that's necessary to do it. So we always say run it like a business, not like in a corporate way, but in an organized way, where you first pick the positions you need and then you fill people to fulfill those positions, not the other way around, because then you end up with a band of misfits and nobody knows what the fuck is going on.
Yeah, peopling is the trickiest part.
So these have been incredible to us. We rent these out for roughly $200 a night, and in comparison, there's someone down the road renting something very similar for $80 a night. So I always get the question as to why do these rent out for 200? One, they're nicely furnished and the photos are good. Two, we have wow factors of the saunas and cold plunges and stuff, and those alone are what draw people here. People drive 6 hours from Vancouver to come here for 2 nights just to use these and pay that much. People really just want to get out of the city. So I think that's very much why. Versus you slap one of these on the dirt and you have nothing else going on, it's a little harder to get people up here. So, and then we rent them out, like we do like kind of a property rental. And that's usually between like $4,000 to $6,000 a weekend for a retreat, for someone to come host their retreat here. And we've done weddings here for around $15,000 for a weekend. So that was how we were doing $30,000 a month within 6 or 7 months of starting here. Meaning we were feet on the ground with nothing here, no water, no toilets, no power, nothing at all. Sleeping in tents, building this, just my brother and I with our own 4 hands. So that we went from that to making 30 grand a month just with some tents, essentially, if you strategize that right. But yeah, you want to look inside one of these?
Sure.
Have you been in yours yet?
I have.
Okay, you want to check that one out, or you want to check that one out?
I think it just doesn't matter. Or I guess this one doesn't have
Yeah.
grass in it.
Yeah, sure.
Doesn't have my bag on the couch. And 4 is my favorite.
You picked a good season. Everything's in bloom.
Yeah. I'm lucky that the rain doesn't come till tomorrow.
Good boy. Oh, they doubled up on the bed in this one. I guess we got multiple guests coming tomorrow.
It's like a little studio. Would be perfect for like artist residency kind of thing too.
Mm-hmm.
Creative spaces. I shall not pet the dog.
How an aquifer works is that it will actually build up inside our mountain, right? So when water hits our property, instead of you can't stop it, but you can slow it down. So slow it down using swales and using this pond network, and it'll actually, instead of just running off and taking the soil with it, it'll let the water hold still for a little longer and sink deeper into our aquifer. And then from there, it'll actually build up and pressurize inside of our mountain, and then what that pressure will actually push a spring out, which is actually right on the other side of this pond. So there's 2 seasonal springs on the property that are seasonal now, but you can tell by the topography of the land that they used to run year round, they're essentially creeks. So we think that by doing this pond network, we can actually repressurize that and then have year-round running water on the land once again, which would introduce hydropower and all sorts of other amazing things for us. You can see the lines of trees kind of like following the ridge lines up the mountain. So you can basically follow where the water's going by looking at where the trees are going and specific types of trees. So it might be hard to see on the camera, but you can see right on the edge of that cliff at the bottom of it, there's a patch of poplar trees. So we know that there's a lot of water gathering in that one spot. And that right about that point, about halfway up the mountain, that'll be the highest elevation pond that we'll be putting in. So that gives you perspective on just like how wide reaching it will be. And yeah, so that's where we'll get a road system, because we build road systems around all of the water systems. So that's where the road would probably end. And then from there, we'll build a little staircase up to the peak. This is the start of the first zone of our fire break. So we're in a fire country, so it could hit us any year. And we have a 7-step fire protection system that we are putting in place. It is obviously a work in progress, as with everything, never-ending projects. So I'll just try to hammer through those real quick. One, your first zone of your fire break is going to have nothing in it. You can have, it's grass and pasture land. So right now we're in the middle of clearing that. So we've cleared that. We'll be getting rid of these brush piles, everything. And the distance of that should be roughly 2 times the height of the nearby trees. So if you have an 80-foot tree, this should be 160 foot wide. That's kind of where you want it to be. Just for aesthetics, we've kind of left a little bit less just because the tent is right there and things like that. And then your next zone is you're going to leave the trees, but you're going to thin them out. So any smaller brush, things like that, all that's going to go. You're going to take that down. You're going to limb all the trees up about 13 feet up. Any tree limb that's hanging below 13 feet, you limb that. And that would be actively managed and actively grazed, all of this. So this actually is stacking functions in that it would act as an animal highway and pasture land to actually move animals around our property. So we have tough terrain that we're working with. A lot of people here think that we can't farm this. Even us getting a garden going, people thought we were insane and said we couldn't grow anything up here. So we're determined to prove everybody wrong. So we're on a big square lot, and there's mountainous terrain and stuff all around us. So essentially what we're doing is we want the cattle at some points in time near us, because that's near our main central area where all the people are, so that we can manage them, take care of them if there's health issues, bring them closer to us in the winters and things like that. But then other times when we want to send them to pasture land's way on the other side of our property. So this is the animal highway that will get them there, is they will essentially run the fire break all the way around our property, so it acts like a little road for them to travel. So this will be one of the greatest areas to really regenerate the soil and let them come through and graze. Obviously actively managed, where, you know, cows come through, sheep come through, goats come through, one after the next. Another big one's going to be a V-ditch. Not really a big one, a small one really. A V-ditch that would help with brush fires. So that would be a ditch that would kind of go like that, steep on the outside. So if a fire runs along, fire does not travel well downhill. So it would a less likely chance that it'd be able to jump that. So that's just for brush fires. And then other than that, we have some more intense things that we would like to do. We would like to be able to bring gravity-fed sprinkler systems all the way around, so that we can just crank it on and leave in case of a wildfire. There are some more, I guess, intense thoughts that we would like to do, essentially after all the things that we've talked about with our permaculture designer to do naturally. We said, okay, what's our chance of actually defending our property from a wildfire? And they said 50%. I said, okay, well, how do we get it to 80? I like the 80-20 rule. I want to be at 80% protected. So a couple other things is, in the Paradise, California fires, there was one of the houses left standing was by an architect who knew it wasn't an if but a when that they were going to get hit. So what he did is he put a heat shield on his entire house. And what that looks like is you use metal siding, which is common, but then you put an 1.5-inch spacer, and then you put another layer of metal siding. And a heat shield will actually it'll actually absorb 70% of the heat, which is insane. So essentially we want to equip every building on the property with a heat shield, so that a wildfire could run right through here and nothing would happen. It would be totally fine. So when we look at our tiny homes later, you'll notice that we pick specific siding for that. The other kind of intense things we would do is probably buy water trucks to put out spot fires as we drive around and there's spot fires in there. The other thing that we're actually willing to do, and we've already had quotes on it, would be to put probably a 12-foot metal wall all the way around the entire property, which sounds insane. But when you think about it, if you're going to pay 150 grand or something to try and do that, that ends up actually being way cheaper than it would be to obviously let your property just get overrun by a wildfire. So we're not opposed to that. And then gravity-fed water cannons that would be towers around the property where we would actually stay here and actually try and fight it. So that's which again, people think we're insane, but like, we're also insane to be here in the first place. So yeah, and this is a good example of a pond. Hi, buddy. So this was, you can tell by the trees where most of the water is. So as we walk around the property, you know, this is a good example. There's lots of poplar trees here, aspen trees, birch trees, and they love water. So you always know that you can kind of track water beneath ground by what is growing there. And this last year was at the level of these trees, and it was just like, it wasn't holding any water. It was just kind of like a little, not a swamp, but like a little bit of a mud pit. So we came in here and we dug this out. So this is actually deep enough on both sides to swim in it, which is really awesome to see this coming to life. This is one of the more longer term things. You know, it's easy to build a tent and see the progress. It's easy to, you know, have a sauna come in or whatever and see the progress. But with this is something that's more organic, where you dig it and then you don't know if it's going to hold water. And you don't know how long it's going to take to fill. Some of these might take 5 years to actually reach the proper height that we want them to stay at. So this one is probably one of the lowest ponds on the property. So hopefully over the years, this will be the one that will be, well, most of the lower ones should stay full like year round, and the higher ones up will drain into them. But this has no pond liner in it and no clay. So the fact that it's holding water is kind of really awesome to begin with. So we're really excited about that, especially this is being its very first year. So, you know, we'll see where it lasts all summer. But yeah, overall, really excited to be able to get to do this. This is one of those investments that is so long-term that I'm actually most proud of about our entire project, because if that's all I do in my entire lifetime is finish these ponds, they will last tens of thousands of years and they will change the ecosystem in this landscape forever. But everything else will fall. Everything else will fall, except if it's made out of rock. So I'm really, really excited about these. And it's hard for people to justify doing these a lot of the time, because this type of work for regenerating the land usually doesn't have any kind of immediate financial return. So it's very expensive to do, but you don't get a whole lot of financial return, at least in the short term. But in the long term, we have been brainstorming ways that we can use that to enhance the property. Obviously just making it into a bit of a paradise, making it more beautiful. Swimming holes, like natural swimming pools type deal. You know, in a few weeks, we're putting a floating sauna in at what we call the lake that we're building, which is like a pearl blue lake. So we'll go up there later. As well as we've thought of even floating Airbnbs, things like that, just like real wow factors, just that people would love to come stay in. And then also a really good example of this is actually Sepp Holzer's work, which I believe is in Austria. And I was told that their government actually rezoned his land as an amusement park because he was having so many people fly in from all over the world just to see what he had done. And I believe he has over a network of over 60 ponds. Which is pretty wild. So it shows that it attracts people when you do something that other people don't do and make it unique. So this should be the second largest project of its type in the world, next to Sepp Holzer's work. So there's a couple things that we use to be able to predict where to focus our resources, or where we're going to be hit by wildfire. So a couple things. One is travels faster uphill and travels faster where there's a lot of fuel. So we're on the side of a mountain right now. We're standing here. So that right back there is basically one giant ramp of great fuel. So that's our most vulnerable side, not just because of that, but because the other side we have a mountain. So it's not really getting through there because it doesn't travel well downhill. The other huge thing is using a wind map. So I just use something like windy.com or something like that. And you can go in there and you can look at your prevailing wind. So we have a wind coming from the south. So we know that if a fire starts to the south of us and it's coming uphill with a lot of fuel, we're kind of screwed. If a fire starts north of us, people will be calling, like, because this has happened. Every summer we have people, just our families and friends are like, "Are you guys okay? There's fires everywhere," like freaking out. And it's like, we just look at the maps. We know which way the wind is blowing. We know that if something is north of us, that it's not going to hit us and is fine, generally. And we know where to focus our resources, and that's why we're starting the fire break on this south side, because that's the most dangerous side for us, essentially. And to give you perspective on the property from the gate that's just behind us, our property line goes diagonal up over the peak of that mountain and stops right about there. So we're just building on this 15-acre little section down in this valley, and slowly expanding the pond network and the access roads, you know, around there. We hike the mountains sometimes, and we actually have we're planning a man camp this fall, which will be pretty funny. Which is funny, it was actually an idea from a woman named Ruth, who is the funniest guest we've ever had at any of our workshops. And she was tired of hearing people complain about the mosquitoes and stuff, and she's like, oh, we got to take you all to man camp. So we've decided we're actually going to do it, and the goal of man camp is going to be a mission-oriented 1-week adventure. And we're going to bring a bunch of guys together, and we're going to take some trees down, mill all of our own wood, build a road halfway up that mountain, and then we're going to hike all of our own milled timber to the very peak, and we're going to build a meditation studio out of it, and we're going to dedicate it to our elder Vern, who passed 2 years ago. So it's not, you know, some kind of crazy building or anything, but it's pretty nice to have something that's just organized and usable. So we have 2 cans. This can is more for mechanical stuff, you know, anything around like metalworking and things like that, and obviously some storage. And then there's a separate solar system that runs all of this. But the next can is all woodworking, which is a little bit nicer. So they normally have the miter saw set up in here, so you can do all your cutting and stuff, and it's a nice insulated can that they can work in the winters. So cans were one of the best things that we started bringing up here. I wish we started sooner. 10 years ago when they cost $500, and now they're like $5,000. We lucked out and got these already insulated. They were already spray foamed, got a really good deal on them, just on Marketplace. But yeah, when we started, we actually started with a Quonset hut, like a military tent that was just made out of like vinyl. And when we first came up here, when we first brought the property, that's what we took up. And we figured, fuck it looks cool, whatever. It costs like $3,500 or something like that. Full metal substructure, had like a locking door and everything. We're like, this is sweet. So we put it up, and then we leave for like a month, and we come back completely destroyed. A branch falls through it. There was pack rats in it, ate through all the vinyl, ate everything in it, shit everywhere. We're nesting in it. It was everything. We had to throw the whole thing out. So I always tell people, like, if you, whatever your first thing is on site, when we landed here, when there's nothing here, it's very different than going to a job site in the city. Even if you have trades experience, you go to a job site in the city, you can go get lunch and you can go home at the end of the day. You can't do that out here when you're in the middle of nowhere. So when we first started, Shelby, my brother, he would go do runs. He would take the truck and trailer, he'd go out to the city, and he'd be gone for a couple days before he comes back with everything. So he'd leave me here with enough food, and I would have to sit here with the cans just to make sure that nobody would steal anything, because we have a lot of equipment and all this stuff. We have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of tools laying around. So someone always has to be on site. So I was here, at one point, I was here during COVID, for I think 3 or 4 months straight without leaving the property once. So I was just like a bushman and just like didn't even know what it was like to be in the city anymore. And I remember I finally went into town and I walk in, and all of a sudden someone's screaming at me because I don't have a mask on, and I'm like, holy shit, I'm like, I forgot this was even existed. So this is a really big luxury, because we were working out in the rain for a long time, and we were using this as storage. So. A little tip for people on getting tools discounted and potentially free, or free use of tools, is that, for one, there's often different grades of tools. So if you go to Home Depot and just buy hand tools like, you know, Sawzall, drill, whatever the heck, they're often a homeowner's grade. whereas the professional grade tools are actually sold by salesmen that like work for like Milwaukee or DeWalt or whatever it is. And if you contact them, they often, what they give, they'll give a full kit to like a construction company for like 3 months for free, and just give you like thousands of dollars. Like we got like $3,000 to $5,000 worth of tools, and they just give us all like everything. And they're like, here, use it. If you like it, then buy it from us. Because that's how they get new clients for big construction companies, by giving them these samples almost. And normally at the end of the 3-month term, then you would either pay for them at a discounted rate, so you still get better tools for cheaper, or sometimes they just forget about them. So then you just get them. Well, I think there was a bit of both there. I think somebody was just really nice that they did that for us, but also they kind of forgot. So these, we're going to be putting, like, you can get big tent structures like we have on our main. So we're probably just going to do that over these. And then we'll have 2 bays of working area for just parking stuff under in the winter and being able to build stuff in the winter. And then this is kind of the dream, is what we'd love to do here is build a massive shop. So I dream of something that's 3 containers long and 3 containers high, so that you'd have like a big massive bay where you could store stuff, you could do whatever, and then you'd probably get 6 full-size apartments on top of it just for extra housing, because it's just something that you never really know, I guess. I'd like to be able to have stuff here for our parents and things like that as they age and whatever it might be, staff housing. And this is another like crazier idea. If we ever make enough money, I'd like to dig all this out, and I'd like to put an underground bunker, like a massive $2 million concrete bunker underneath all of this. And just have enough food storage for everybody here for like 10 years. So I'm not really, I don't know if I consider myself a prepper, but like maybe that is considered preppish. but I just genuinely think that, you never know. I'd rather be safe than sorry, and this is very much a legacy project that we want to be able to pass down for many generations in the future. So, and it's fun. Yeah, so this is what we want to build into our staff housing area. So we bought these cans. They're kind of a cheap way to go. These cost like $14,000 Canadian each, roughly 14 to 17K. This one was outfitted originally for an office. We were going to put this up at the Lookout, which we'll go to next. And this was meant to just have a lot of windows so that we could sit in there and have an epic view. Now, I don't know if we're going to use it that way anymore. We might just kind of jerry-rig it into more of a lounge and library space, like a shared common space. Or we could put a wall in the middle and turn it into 2 larger suites. And then this one I was actually really happy with. So this is just 3 bedrooms for staff housing, big enough for a queen-size bed, a desk, and a wardrobe type deal. And then the plan is that we're going to get 2 more, and we're going to stack them on top in the opposite direction, and then put a roof on top of those. So it'll kind of be like an open air concept, where on top of these would be like a little rooftop patio kind of deal, and there'd be some stair systems down, and then you'd have like lounge area with some potted plants and things like that, and stuff out here. So this would be just a gathering area for all of our live work exchange folks to just come and have fun and have their own space. And then we'll thin out these trees, but this will generally just be a blocker to the rest of everything else. So you see how we're trying to keep things central, where we have, we're keeping the humans close to zone 0, and then close to all of the workshop area as well. So really trying to like keep everything in, but still have enough separation that people get their privacy. All right, when we started, we made a couple mistakes with solar, which we paid way too much money for. So we ended up trusting a guy who was he was an electrical engineer. So we're like, okay, this guy must know what he's talking about. And then we later figured out that pretty much every solar salesman, they're all just mainly ordering shit from China, and they're ordering stuff from other suppliers. So they kind of have like a dozen suppliers supplying you, like one person does the solar panels, other people sending you wiring, other people sending you inverters, someone else is sending you the controller, and someone else is sending you the batteries. So anytime something goes wrong, For one, it's super complicated to be able to hook up. So they tell you that you can have a plug-and-play system, which to me means that anybody can go and plug it in and it works. But they send you something and it is so utterly complicated. It took us 3 different Red Seal electricians, and I'm a third-year electrical apprentice myself, so I'm not an idiot when I'm looking at it, but I'm like, nobody could figure it out because you don't get educated about that in electrical school. So we ended up doing that, that was our original setup, which is like a 4 kilowatt setup. And we ended up paying, I don't know, something like $15,000 for that. And then we switched to this setup, and we ended up paying something like $20,000, so a little bit more, but we ended up getting like triple or 4 times the amount of power out of it. So this is a 28 kilowatt setup, which powers all of our homes, which is just, honestly, it works out to being like, yeah, 3 to 4 times or 3 times as much for the same amount of money, which was like absolutely insane to us that you could get so screwed on solar. So we're really heavy on just supplying our clients with like proper connections on who to buy from. And not only was it way more, not cheaper, but like way more power, or cheaper depending on what you need, it was also way easier to set up. We could plug and play it ourselves in one weekend. The whole thing was set up. So we can walk this way and just check out what that looks like. So that's our pump house. This is our powerhouse, but it also has water running through it. When you're expanding water on a property that's so big, we essentially need to repressurize it, unless you have like a farm, industrial, commercial grade pump system, which are expensive. But right now, this is just more for living, not necessarily for cattle and things of that sort. So yeah, this is our inverter, battery banks. And then what we've had to do is essentially bring our water up and then give it a boost with a jet pump, and then put it back in the ground and send it out to everything else. So essentially, for every 5 houses, we need another one of these for water to just continue expanding it around the property. Or the alternative is you end up drilling a well for another $20,000 or $30,000. So this is what we're doing here right now. And for backup, we run 2 generators in series, or that's what we're hooking up at the moment. We got into the winter up here and it got so cold that the wires were brittle and cracked, and our Jenny just completely shut off. And we don't get much sun in the winter, so we're running mostly on Jenny through at least 2 or 3 months out of the winter. So all power went down. We have no cell service, so you can't look anything up on the internet to fix it, and then you also can't call anybody. So you're sitting here at 2 a.m., you got pipes freezing and bursting, and you got no power, no internet, and everybody's freaking out. So this year, a couple upgrades we're doing is we bought a second one, so they're hooked up in series, so if one goes down, the other turns on. We're also framing this in with the lumber here, and insulating this so that this will be out of the wind, and it'll actually be self-heating, because obviously these run hot, with an exhaust system out the back. So every year we're just learning new things and upgrading the systems, but we're looking like we're going to go into this winter pretty bulletproof, hopefully. That's a great example of where a dam wall for a pond would go, just as a gully, and you can see all the poplar trees there. So this is a good example of the water access structures thing, because essentially loggers came up here and they figured the easiest way to put a road in would just be up this gully. So they chose access before water, and then in the springtime, this turns into a creek. So it just comes down, and now you can see it's just a 2-foot muddy shithole where we can't pull anything through, and now it's completely unusable. So, but the pro of that is actually that we'll be removing this, and this whole hillside will actually be cascading water or ponds. So there'll be about 7 cascading ponds all the way through here that one will drain into the next. So yeah, this road won't be a road very soon.
Like this weekend.
Yeah.
After all the rain.
We'll see if we get through here. guys taking rocks out for that retaining wall.
Mm-hmm.
Good boys.
They're like, yes, go for a run, yes. Guys must have a ton of excavators.
Just the two.
Just two.
Yeah, we got the mid-size and the mini. Yeah, some of the jobs they're not quite the right machinery for. Some of the pond digging, for example, we took that. This would be a great spot for like a little wedding venue.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of the ponds, we took that medium-sized excavator for 30 days straight. We tried to dig this pond, which I'll show you next, and it's big and it did okay, but then we had loggers come through, and the loggers had a D8 cat with them, so we rented it for like $1,000 for like 6 hours. In 6 hours, it did more work than our mid-sized excavator did in an entire month. It was pretty wild to see, you know, what having the right machinery does. So this is what we call the lower lookout. So we're about halfway through the property right now. So we were just down at the gate, now we're kind of halfway, and the other half is kind of on the other side. So most of it's almost untouched. So we got lots of room to grow. And then from the distance wise, this is kind of the property line right here, and it goes about halfway up that hill in the very back. So yeah, most of it, I've hiked this for days and days and days on end, and I still come across areas where I'm just like, I have never been here before. We imagine here that we'll do an office space. We consider doing something out of shipping containers where we would do kind of like 2 containers side by side with another 40-footer stacked on top, cantilevered over the edge with a nice kind of covered patio underneath. So it would be like a shared co-working space, mainly for our own staff, but guests obviously would be allowed to use it as well. But it would be dual use. You could use it for events and things. You could use it for retreats and things of that sort as well. So yeah, that's the vision for the lookout. This is one of the nicer views that's easier to get to without taking a 40-minute hike. So I was talking about pasture land before. We would end up thinning some of these trees and then slowly clearing rocks and some of the shrubbery and stuff out of here, and this would be a lot of our pasture land would kind of be down throughout these rolling hills and kind of where we just drove through. So it's not it's a pretty wild terrain to work with, but you get different opinions from everybody. Some people think we're nuts and they're like, fucking cows ain't gonna go up that. And then we get other people who are like, there'll be cows halfway up your mountain, no problem. I don't know what those talking about. So we didn't grow up with cows. So I mean, I grew up with like my best friend on a dairy farm, but I don't know really anything about actually being a farmer. So we just, I don't know, we err on the side of optimism, I suppose.
There's only one way to find out, right?
Yeah, but we want to go with, what are they called? Highland. We want to go with Highland cows just because they're fuzzy and look cool. they I think they're better for our winters. Also, apparently the meat is really good. They just grow faster, so they grow slower, which is why most places don't want them. But I think that's what we'll go with. This is what we call the lake. So this is probably the one thing I'm most proud of on the entire property, just because it's such a long-term project to even have been able to allocate resources to it was an achievement in and of its own. So we're about 1/3 of the way done. You know, like I mentioned before, this was about a month on a mid-size excavator. And then we had a D8 cat come in, and in 6 hours it did more work than the excavator did in 1 month. So it turned out, it could have turned out nicer with the watercolor, just a nice like
So beautiful.
pearlescent blue. It is silty bottom, so it gets dirty when you walk in, but we're building the dock, so 3 weeks from now, we already have a sauna, a mini sauna. It's like a 3 or 4 person, and we got a dock that we'll be building in a few weeks, waiting on materials to come in, so we'll have a floating sauna here in a few weeks, which will be sweet. Yeah, so this will be the biggest pond on the property, and the reason we started with it, and this is like the farthest away from where everything else on the property is. Like our property line's right here. It's the opposite side and over top of a mountain. So the reason we started with this was because this has the most water catchment out of anything on the property. So we figured instead of making a bunch of smaller ponds that may or may not fill up, we may as well start this one that we are much more certain will actually fill up. And that way, if we need the water for, you know, fight a fire, whatever it is, you can still lay a pipe and you can fucking get a hose to the other side pretty easily with a tractor, and then be able to siphon it to the other side of the land if we wanted to. So, yeah, this is one of the this pond alone, I think, will hold almost the same amount of water as the rest of the ponds on the entire property combined. So we got to keep digging. It's only dug deep about 1/3 of the way right now, so we have a little more to go. So this will probably be another 2 years in the making.
But you get to enjoy it all along the way.
Yeah, we're just really excited to be able to swim in it this year. So we plan on doing, you know, we'll do the floating sauna, and then once we're closer to being finished, we'll bring beach sand in here and actually make a nice little beach. And eventually, we think that we'll actually extend residence over here, and we'll end up building, like right now we're in tiny homes, and then in the future we'd end up building more long-term homes. And we think being right near our own private lake would be kind of cool. So we might end up putting some houses up in there, or we thought about doing some A-frames and like guest cabins on this side as well, to get to enjoy this, as well as in the winter it'd be a really epic spot to play hockey and do all that kind of stuff.